Okay, and we are recording. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet those of you who I have not already met earlier in the day. I'm Jared. I took over for Michael, as you are well aware of, and I'm looking forward to the term, getting to know you all. I provided a brief introduction about myself in the email that I sent out a couple months back, but just in case you forgot, I just finished my PhD in special education in a program that was a joint effort between UC Berkeley and San Francisco State University. So I got to learn about kind of the practical components of special education at SF State and kind of the more research theories and methodologies at UC Berkeley. Before I got my PhD, I worked for about 7 years supporting children, adolescents, young adults with autism, mostly, and then for about 2 years, adults with a variety of other disabilities. This work started in early intervention, so doing like ABA in-home therapy for children who were newly diagnosed with autism, and also children and adolescents who were had had their diagnoses for some time. We did a lot of work in-home, as I mentioned. I did a lot of work in the community, so working on kind of generalizing the skills that we taught at home into community settings. I also worked in the classroom with our students, with some of them, those who were in school. From there, I made a shift to working with young adults. And this first occurred with recent high school graduates who had autism and the diagnosis formerly known as Asperger's syndrome, high-functioning autism, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. These disabilities that are no longer actually disabilities that one can receive a diagnosis for. And so this work was in the context of employment services, which I really enjoyed. So I was the intake and assessment coordinator for an organization in the Bay Area in California. Just south of San Francisco is where I worked. And my role was to kind of bring our clients into our program and to kind of get an idea about their intended employment objectives, and then to work with them on kind of all, a whole variety of pre-employment skills. So resume development, interview skills, etc. I also did job development, so I would actively reach out into the community to business owners and try to develop relationships with them in the hopes that they would be interested in, in hiring our clients. Once they got jobs, I would then shift into a job coach, and so I would shadow the young men and women that I work with on the job to get an idea about kind of where they had strengths, where they were experiencing challenges, and then coming up with ways to kind of meet those challenges in the workplace. I spent a lot of time as a shoe salesman at Kohl's department store, which is actually a very challenging job. We had a young man placed there. Did a lot of work at AMC movie theaters. This was a very popular job for our clients because most of them love movies, and their coworkers are generally people of their age. And they got discounts on movies. So that was kind of like the ideal situation in which you find a job that kind of is lined up or in alignment with the interests that our clients had, which is very important for people with disabilities, finding something that they're kind of intrinsically motivated to do. I feel that we as people, neurotypical individuals, we can have a job that we don't necessarily like, but we're good at faking that we do. It's going to be more challenging for people with some disabilities. And yeah, from there, I started my program, and I worked at it for 6 years, and then I finished. So I basically can't go back to school now. I've kind of maxed out my school career, and worked for a year at Berkeley doing educational research, so designing assessments and such at the Berkeley Evaluation and Assessment Research Center. And then I saw this job, which was very appealing to me. A, because I really am passionate about the field of special education, and I do enjoy teaching. I do enjoy getting to know people, which I'm in a good position to do so. And B, because Bay Area, Oakland, California, San Francisco, California is a very expensive and draining and fast-paced lifestyle. And so getting the opportunity to come to La Grande, Oregon, I grew up actually in a very small community in northeastern California called Fall River Mills, population of about 600 people. So I'm no stranger to a small rural environment. And so this was like a perfect opportunity. Plus I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and I was very interested in kind of getting her out of the city and giving her an upbringing that was kind of more similar to the one that I got to experience as a kid. So that's me. I know that you all know each other. You've been taking classes together for an academic year. But if you don't mind, I would like to just learn a bit about you all. We don't have to go into too much depth, but I would like to know what is your current position? What school do you work at? What district is that school in? How many years did you work in general education before deciding to make the shift to special education? How many years have you been working in special education, and what made you make that transition? So I'm just going to go down my list here. I have Kim. Do you prefer Kim or Kimberly?
Sorry, I muted it. Sorry. I go by Kimberly.
Okay. Kimberly, what is your current position?
I am the SPED teacher at London School. It's a K-8 school, and I'm also the reading specialist.
Oh, reading
So
specialist.
I work in South Lane School District, and there's like 3 of us in this.
Did you say South Lake?
South Lane.
South Lane.
Yeah. It's just south of Eugene.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 3 of us in the cohort that work there. And this is my 3rd year in SPED. I did 15 years in Gen Ed before that. Lots of different things. ELL and all sorts of stuff. And then what else am I supposed to say?
Oh, I was just curious about what, after spending time in general education, what made you want to change to special education?
Well, actually, I left education after our 4th child was born, and actually I didn't think I was going to go back to education.
Okay.
And I was prompted by a principal, Ann Fisk, who Amy knows, to actually, she read my resume and said that that I should actually, based on my experience and everything that I've done, either become a principal or go into special education. And I don't want to be a principal.
Okay. So that limits the options.
Yeah, and I just, it's a better fit for me. I prefer small group intervention. I prefer working one-on-one with kids and targeting their skills and then working on those very specific skills. I'm just fascinated by the way that different kids learn in general, whether they're in SPED or not. So getting that other perspective of education was just something that was an interest to me. So I took her advice.
Okay.
And decided to do SPED.
Yeah, no, it really is a fascinating field when you start thinking about learning differences and kind of this challenge that the traditional approach to education creates for these children, right? And it really makes you think about, the fact that, well, the way that we normally do things isn't necessarily the right way to do things for everyone. That's one thing that I really like about special education as well, is just dealing with that diversity in thinking and learning ability. And so, sorry, Kim, what school did you say you worked at?
I work at London School.
London, okay.
Yeah, it's a school district. Well, they closed Latham. How many do we have now? 85? 4 We're
There's
down to
4
4.
elementaries.
We have 4 elementaries, and 2 of them are rural. Mine and Dorena. And so we're way out there, and we're both, Dorena in my school is K-8, and the other 2 are K-5.
Okay,
So,
and you're K-5?
No, I'm K-8.
Oh, you're K-8, sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, Ken.
Yep.
Okay, who do I have next on my list? Ooh, Lori, you're up.
Can't hear.
Can you hear me? Lori, you might be muted.
How about that?
Oh yeah, you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, all right. Well, it's my 7th year as a gen ed educator, and after doing a few years in the gen ed classroom, I just found myself not necessarily satisfied.
Okay,
with
so you
work.
did your 7th year as a special educator?
No, I'm gen
Oh.
ed.
Janet, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not necessarily satisfied as a gen ed educator, and I always kind of knew I would head for special ed, wasn't sure when, and thus paths converged, and now is the time.
Okay.
This is my 16th year in the working in the education field in a variety of different ways. I am currently working as an EA in a life skills classroom.
Oh, cool transition.
Well, I know, right?
Yeah, that's my gig.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm learning a lot every day, and the people I work with are wonderful. I work in the Bend Lapine School District.
Say that again. You kind of broke up.
Okay. I work in the Bend Lapine School District.
Bend Lapine School District. Okay. Sorry.
Up in Bend.
Okay.
And I have 2 daughters. I'm an autism mom.
Okay.
I have 2 daughters. They will be 21 and 22 very soon. Originally diagnosed with Asperger's and the other NVLD, and bipolar disorder and TAG.
Okay.
On the second one. So I have a pretty strong personal background with special needs kids, professionally, personally, and this is the right pathway for me.
Well, right. I mean, just think about the topic of this class, collaboration, and generally that occurs between general education teachers, special education teachers, and parents. So you like collaborate with yourself.
Yeah.
And what was the name of the school again?
It is Lava Ridge Elementary.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, Lori.
Yeah.
Okay, I have Erin up next.
Hi.
Hi, Erin.
I started as a SPED EA in 2005 in the Oregon Trail School District in Sandy. And I followed a group of students through their sophomore year. They started as 6th graders, and I followed them through their sophomore year when I decided I wanted to become a teacher. And at the beginning of their junior year, I said, adios, I'm doing this on my own. And I got my teaching license and my master's. And that was around 2011-ish. And I have my endorsements in language arts in multiple subjects.
Okay.
I have my ESOL endorsement from Eastern Oregon. I got that a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
My mom told me years ago that I should have done SPED right around the time I got my master's, and then the last few years, like, I should have done that. I have been subbing since I got my master's degree. I work in 10 different districts. I live just outside of Portland, so I have all of the East Multnomah County schools to my disposal, and then one on the west side of the Willamette River.
Okay.
I mostly do special ed and middle school, and I dabble here and there in high school if I know the teacher. Otherwise, I don't do it at all.
So
And
is
then
it a consultative role that you hold?
No,
No, okay.
no, I just choose. I'm very picky.
So what is your official title?
Substitute teacher.
Okay.
Substitute teacher. I'm just very picky with who I substitute for
Okay.
and the positions that I take.
Got it.
Yeah. And being a substitute teacher, I am able to do that.
Yeah,
So,
it's nice to have kind of that flexibility.
and being able to choose which programs I go into as a substitute teacher makes it very nice. If I want to do SPED one day and biology the next day, it's kind of nice.
Excellent. Cool, thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up I have Marta.
Hi. I'm in the Elgin School District, and Stella Mayfield is the name of our school.
What was it? LMA?
Stella
Stella.
Mayfield in
Okay,
Elgin, Oregon.
got it.
So I'm about 10 miles north of where you're at.
Right. No, I've heard of Elgin. I've not yet made it that way yet.
Not there yet.
Not yet. I'll be there eventually.
I have been teaching for 30 plus years. I was gen ed for 30 years with second grade, fourth grade, and then I was Title I specialist for 15 years with reading and math. And I've always worked closely with special ed teachers and the diagnostician with the Title I kids. And we had a kind of an emergency, and they asked me if I would consider stepping into the SPED role for, a year or so. And I've always loved it. I have a niece with special ed and other family members, so it was kind of something I grew up with. And so I just was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll step in. And originally it was just going to be a year, and now it's turned into I'm into my fourth year, and probably will keep going since I'm going to go ahead and get my endorsement.
Awesome.
I have a variety of kids from kindergarten through sixth grade, but I also have two special needs kids that will be 16 this fall. And one that's extremely challenging. He only comes for about 2 hours. He's autistic. Had been homeschooled for quite a while until I got into the program.
Transition, the individual transition plan.
Yep.
Okay.
His twin sister is the other one, and so yeah, it's been interesting. In fact, there's probably some things I might just have to talk to you about with him, because sometimes I feel like I'm not making any difference, and then other times I see a difference, and then it seems like we go back again.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's tough. You always want to see just that continual progress, but the old saying, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back, depending on the day.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I would, feel free to bounce questions off me. I'm, happy to share from my experiences working with that kind of population within that part of their life. So, awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Now I have Amy. Hello, Amy.
Hi. I am also in the South Lane School District in Cottage Grove, Oregon here. And I'm teaching at Harrison Elementary School, which is a rather large elementary school in the area. We have over 500 students, and I teach, my caseload includes kindergarten through 4th grade students, and we have another teacher who does 4th and 5th grade. This is my, I did 1 year under tutelage under our SPED director as a SPED teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that at Latham Elementary School it was most of a year. And then I've also taught 3rd grade and 2nd grade. And so this is my 3rd year teaching. Before that, I was an educational assistant in an autistic classroom for 5 years. And that was a real learning experience. Learned a lot about behaviors and ways to help kiddos learn who struggle. And I decided I wanted to to get my endorsement. Actually, it was after the year I did Latham teaching that partial year as a SPED teacher at Latham. That's when I decided I wanted to become a SPED teacher, because I really enjoyed the small groups. I enjoyed working with those kiddos who have a hard time learning and finding ways to get through to them. I like that a lot.
Very rewarding work.
Yes, a lot of work, but also very rewarding and fun. I enjoy it.
No, absolutely. I doing the in-home behavior therapy, we had, behavior intervention plans in place, and just kind of learning to deal with challenging behavior has helped me so immensely with my 3.5-year-old daughter.
Oh yeah.
It's like, I think everyone who wants to be a parent should go work, with children or adolescents with behavioral challenges. And it really puts things into perspective.
Definitely.
So you never worked in the field of general education?
Yeah, I did basically 1 full year as a 2nd grade teacher, as a general ed teacher, and then I did that partial year I did a SPED at Latham. I was a 3rd grade teacher.
Okay.
But what happened is that 3rd grade class was too small, and so they dissolved the class, split them between 2 other teachers, and put me in the SPED thing because they were needing more SPED teachers. So I worked under the SPED director, and now I'm getting my endorsement in it. So
Soon. You got the email from Janet. It's coming up, the test.
Yes.
The Arella. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Amy. Oh, and now I have Rowan. Hello, Rowan. You got your microphone muted there.
Hi.
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 Nice to meet you.
So I work at this is new to my cohort. I got a job over the summer, everyone. I was a substitute teacher in the Beaverton School District, subbing elementary through high school. And as my cohort knows, this is where my love for SPED began. I really enjoyed teaching in the special ed classrooms more than the general ed ones, so I decided to do my endorsement. And then over the summer, I got a job teaching biology and economics at a private school for students with learning differences. So they are highly impacted with dyslexia, dysgraphia, anxiety, and ADHD. And so I'm working there part-time now.
Okay.
Previously to that, I've taught in high school for 18 years, biology and science. And then while I was subbing, I did across the board.
Okay. And what's the name of the school that you work at?
The name of the school, yes, Edison High School. It's in Beaverton, which is northwest of Portland.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the grounds of Jesuit High School, which you may have heard of because that's the school. They sublet some of their classrooms to us. And there's also a crossover between the 2 schools. Some of our higher functioning students go across to the other school and do AP classes, and we have a reciprocal arrangement where some of their students come across and get credits with us.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. It looks like we lost Rachel.
No.
Oh.
I'm here. I'm muted because otherwise.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't.
My
Yeah.
daughter's watching.
My window is not.
So.
Okay.
You want me to go?
Absolutely. Sorry about that. I only show. I'm limited in terms of the number of windows that I see up here, so I thought you had dropped off. I didn't know that Zoom did that. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm in LeGrand. I'm from LeGrand, and I left for a while, but now I'm back. So I teach in the resource room at Central Elementary, which is 4 blocks away from EOU. So
Yeah, I drive by it every day.
Yep. So that's where I teach. There's me and another resource room teacher, and she has about 15 years of experience teaching special ed. So that's been awesome. This is my second year teaching with her. So that's been super nice and helpful. And then last year I was in between Central and Greenwood. I had to drive between at like 11 o'clock each day. But this year I'm just at Central. So that's really nice too. Cause that kind of sucked. So I grew up here in LeGrand. I went to college in Portland at Portland State. And then I came back and got a job as a para educator working one-on-one with 2 different students, a first grader and a kindergartner, because kindergarten was only half day. And they both were ASD. And so I worked with them. And it was awesome. I loved it. But I took the job intending to only take it for a year because I knew I wanted to get my master's degree and go into teaching. So I did that. And then I taught kindergarten in Monmouth, Oregon, which is over by Salem, for 3 years. And then last year I got this job here in special ed. Honestly, I think kind of because my name popped up in the interview stuff and they knew my name here as somebody who'd been in special ed before. And then my dad's the school psychologist for the district. So they were like, she'll do it. So they pulled me in, but I always kind of wanted to get back into it anyway, just because that para job was so fun. And those are the kids that I like working with. And even when I was a kindergarten teacher, the kids who were the kind of behavior kids were always my favorite kids. So I just knew I wanted to get back into that anyway. So yeah, so now I'm doing this and I intend to stick in this kind of thing. So I work with K-5 and we split so there's 2 of us and we split our caseloads kind of right. We have some random stuff, but I have all of the 5th grade and then the first graders, kindergartners and 2nd graders. And then she has a couple 2nd graders, 3rd grade and 4th grade. Because we do not have very many K2 kids. We I think that's true with most places because you're kind of cautious to qualify kids for things and test kids for things before 2nd grade anyway. So yeah, and then I have a 2-year-old daughter who's here, and my husband's actually a vocational rehab counselor for the state. So he works with the high school kids who are coming out of high school, and then people, so the DD people who
work for the Department of Rehabilitation?
He works for vocational rehab for the Department of Human Services. So for the state. Yeah, and he's actually in school getting his master's in social work right now. So he's actually at an internship right now. He's working 12 to 14-hour days while he works full time and does his internship. So so we're sort of busy, but it's good. We're both kind of in the home stretch. So yeah.
Getting close.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So did everyone get a chance to look at the syllabus and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and just pull it up. We can just kind of go over some of the stuff that we'll be doing and give you the opportunity to ask questions if you have any. So I'm gonna take over the screen so you'll see my screen now. Okay. Right, so we're going to be talking about collaboration and consultation. Certainly activities that you are all familiar with. Certainly activity that I'm familiar with. I kind of got the opportunity to experience at least collaboration kind of from outside of the school perspective, because I was kind of the person coming in and supporting students, especially when I was working with the younger kids doing the in-home therapy. And then also some consultation as I worked in the employment services field, consulting with, call it informal consultation with the coworkers of the young adults that we got jobs and managerial staff and whatnot. Toward the end of kind of helping our clients, setting our clients up for success, things, talking about things that they could do, modifications that they can make to the workplace that would kind of help our clients be more successful in their jobs. So we'll have, let's look at the assignments real quick. So the chapters in this book aren't too long, like 25 to 30 pages. It's a very good textbook. I apologize that I was late in the game assigning it. I was initially going to try to find open access resources, but you know, I got my hands on this book a few years back, and just kind of once I saw that I was going to be teaching this class, remembered that I had it, and then started revisiting it and realized what a valuable resource it was. This is what it looks like. Oh, my light's turned on. It's probably reversed for you, but it's very helpful. You know, my goal here, especially with like some of these question sets, are to really kind of engage you all in thinking about kind of the importance of collaboration in special education, and kind of relating some of these things that we'll read about in the textbook back to the experiences that you have at your workplaces. Each of these question sets is only 5 questions long, and they shouldn't require any more than 3 to 5 sentences to answer completely, and they'll kind of unlock as we progress through the term. I will require you to do your own research and find an article that is related to collaboration or consultation or co-teaching. These are all kind of valid topics for this project. And there could be, this article could be focusing on collaboration with general education teachers, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, vocational rehabilitation counselors, really anything that you're kind of interested in exploring. So you certainly have that freedom. And the page length here is 2 to 3 pages. I'm assuming that in your first year with Michael, he turned you all on to kind of the requirements of APA format. Yeah? Big, yes, okay, good. And we have the resource map. This is just an assignment in which I'm asking you to conduct an exhaustive as possible search of the resources in your area that would be appropriate for students, young adults with disabilities, and their families. So these could be, like social groups. These could be, like services provided for students who are kind of who have just transitioned out of high school. So, employment services, residential support services, etc. And really it's, they could be social workers, social work services, psychological services. Really it's up to you to, I give you the freedom to figure out kind of what you want to be the focus of the resource map activity is.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Oh, yeah.
So considering I live in Portland, my target area is much, much larger than my peers' target area. I mean, Rowan is in the same boat I am, being where she lives. Just how big do you want this to be? Because I was looking at your example, and one example printed out to be like 7 pages long with multiple different examples for each set. So, I mean, like homeless shelters, churches. I mean, I have 10 churches within a mile of my house. Right. So, I mean, what do you want me to do? How broad do you actually want that to be? How, what is the scope you want?
Good, good. So, as long as you can do like 5 to 7, it's
5 to 7 what? You need to be very, very, very specific, because I mean, like, I've got homeless shelters, I have churches, I have food pantries, I have the Red Cross, I have clothing closets, I have I have transition projects. I mean, I've got everything. So, I mean, what, 5 to 7, what?
I would say those that are kind of most relevant, that would be most important for somebody who is coming out of high school and, you know, was in special education. Maybe transition services. Maybe there are recreational, you know, services, community access services. It's really, in addition to those suggestions, I would suggest that you just kind of focus on things that you would be interested in and that you think are important. I mean, since you're, you know, living near Portland, yeah, you have a huge kind of resource pool to draw from. And certainly I wouldn't expect you to, you know, sample every possible type of service. So I would, you know, leave it up to you to decide. And I think kind of the best approach would be for you to select, you know, services that you think are important. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't have a strict kind of requirement in terms of the specific things. I just tried to give a few kind of obvious examples here in the prompt. And certainly looking at, you know, the kinds of things that, the kinds of services that the students, you know, researched and that are shown in the examples of this assignment would be a good place to start as well.
Okay, so can I ask a question then? Because now I.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm on the opposite spectrum of Erin.
Right.
We're in a really small. I mean, we have 10,000, but it's relatively small. I'm sure I can find those resources, but you're wanting resources once kids are out of high school.
So,
you don't want, like.
not necessarily. No, sorry. This is just kind of showing my bias. Like all of my focus has always mostly been in kind of the transition area. But no, they can absolutely be services for kids who are still in school, still in high school or elementary school. So that's fine. It could be a mix of the two. Yeah, no, so, you know, as long as an argument could be made that this is a service that, you know, could in theory help out a person with a disability, whether that person is in elementary or high school or has graduated high school, that's really kind of the main qualifier for selecting these services for the resource map, for these resources.
Okay, and so do we like name the service, where it is, like give a description? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, yeah.
Or is it just a list?
So yeah, again, let me pull up one of the examples here and we'll just look at it.
I'm sorry, I didn't look at the examples.
No, that's fine. This is why we're going over it. So you see some people choose to do like a brochure approach. And this was a shorter one of the two. I'm assuming that this was an area, so Hermiston. I'm not sure, how big is Hermiston?
Good size.
Good size, okay.
Yeah, Hermiston is a pretty
Kimberly, this is Jess.
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, when did you join, girl?
Oh, huh?
I can't see you. Your video's not on.
I know, cause it's on my phone, and so I don't want to make you busy, and I don't want to hold my phone up for 2 hours. My computer took a poo today. So Kimberly and we are in the same area. I'm also in Cottage Grove. I didn't get it. I joined late. It was technical difficulties. But I mean, is this something that we could maybe, since I think it's Kimberly, me, and
Amy.
Yeah, we're all in this same school district. Is this something we might be able to collaborate on to kind of help really pool resources? Because I teach at an alternative high school, so I know a lot of like high school transition resources, and I don't know. And it's a small community, so is that something we could collaborate on?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. But I would just ask that after the collaboration is done and like you guys have like your pool of resources, that you then go off on your own and kind of, you know, put your own imprint on it. Like don't all turn in the exact same looking assignment, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah.
that's just the reality of the situation. If you're in a smaller area and there are multiple of you working in the area, well, then, yeah, for sure, there's going to be overlap. So yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yes, so that is the resource map. And then so this is like the main project here, the consultation plan. And so this is one that will need to be uploaded to TaskStream. So this is, as you all know, those assignments that go into TaskStream are like the kind of the official ones required by the state. And so this is just going to be a project in which you determine an appropriate plan for selecting professional collaboration and consultation services for a fictional student of your own creation. Now, the student doesn't have to be fictional. You could just kind of, I think an easier approach would be to think of a student that you might be currently serving, but don't use that student's real name. And then, or unless you want to completely fabricate a student, that's also okay. And so it should be kind of formatted within the structure of an IEP and should really be thought of as a supplementary for planning and instruction. So if we look, and so here's some of the kinds of things that we would want to think about in developing the consultation and collaboration plan. What are these students' educational, physical, safety, community safety, emotional, recreational, and developmental and social needs? So if we look at some of the examples here, I have 2 examples of this assignment, and we won't spend too much time on it. So here on the left column, we have the student's needs. We have just a very brief blurb on the student's background. In the center column, we would have kind of the areas kind of within the student's needs that consultation and collaborative efforts would be targeting, which the team would be kind of working together to meet. And then lastly, in the far right column, the forms and materials that would be, required in order to kind of track progress within the area that you choose. And this isn't a very long project either. We can look at the other one as well. So again, I think given the fact that you all are working with students with in special education, that this is this is a project about what you have thought about, and you've thought about these kinds of things with your students, and so it shouldn't be too much of a challenge to kind of work through this stuff. Any questions so far? Okay, so we'll look at the syllabus now, and
Actually, I have another question.
oh yeah, go ahead.
I was looking, and some of these items are locked, and I'm wondering, are you going to unlock them all ahead of time, or
So the assignments basically, like for example, the one that's due next Tuesday will unlock today at 7 p.m. So you have a full week to get it done.
Okay. I guess I'm wondering, so for me, sometimes what'll happen is I'll have a weekend where I can get ahead.
Okay.
And so having them locked and me not being able to get, and then there's other weeks where I have conferences,
right.
Where I have like next week I literally have 3-4 IEPs in 1 week, and I'm running the RTI meeting. So I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that they can be unlocked a little bit sooner, so if I have a window, I can work on something ahead of time, so I'm not behind.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. I can, so basically, I can go through and change the dates at which they're unlocked. I'll just go ahead and make them all unlock tomorrow, and so to accommodate kind of having a schedule in which sometimes you have more free time and other times you're slammed. So that's definitely not a problem.
I appreciate that. It's just I was looking at the start of the school year. It's just, well, all school year. What am I talking about? Yeah, I just never know. So I just try and do as much as I can when I have a gap.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And hopefully that will be, helpful to others as well. So yeah, I'll go ahead and get that done, no problem. I'm not going to go through all of the objectives. If you're interested in kind of going through these item by item, you have access to the syllabus. So we won't be meeting every week. And I know that this is kind of a different approach than what Michael used, and I apologize for making the change. But this was kind of the best way that I could think of kind of formatting the class for the term. I know that Michael, in the past, he would kind of address both classes in a single meeting. And I considered that, but I think that these two topics are, important enough and different enough to justify two separate meetings. And again, I do understand that you all have busy schedules. You're working full-time, families, children, etc. Some of you are coaching, doing other things. And that's just one of the benefits of an online program is the flexibility. And I'm going to be recording all of the meetings that we do have online. And so if you can't make it, you don't have to, worry about kind of missing out on discussions or things that we covered during them. Certainly, I encourage you to attend the online meetings if you can. And it's kind of, I think that we get a better kind of insight and coverage of the material when we can discuss it, as opposed to, for example, me just recording a lecture into the video camera. But if you can't make it, I totally understand. Again, that's kind of one of the reasons that we have online programs, because people are busy and it's not always possible to make it to meeting times in person for live meeting sessions.
Can I ask another question then?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'll be honest with you. I will never make a Thursday meeting.
A Thursday meeting?
Yeah, that is literally the day. So we're so small. I literally run RTI, SST, IEPs, 504s, and the reading specialist data all on Thursdays, and those were already planned out per my building.
Right.
That's what Thursdays are, and it's kind of far out. By the time I would even leave, sometimes I don't even leave my building on those days until 5 o'clock, and then I have to turn around and go do something else. So if I'm not making any Thursday meetings and I watch the videos, am I supposed to do something additionally, or do I just watch the videos and turn in the assignments? What do I do? Because I'll be lucky if I can get on a Thursday meeting. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. This is the reality of the situation. So I'll have to think about that, and perhaps we can address that kind of offline, just between you and I. I know that Michael kind of asked for a summary of what you learned by watching the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like an appropriate, request. Just to know that you actually took the time to watch the lecture.
Okay.
A brief summary and maybe a few questions, or a question or two.
Yeah, he used to just. It was he just do 3 to 5 sentences, and then we could even just do a bulleted point list, and if that's enough.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll formalize something, and
Okay.
I'll send it around. I'll put it on Canvas, and then I'll send it around to everyone. And yeah, just so everyone is kind of, has a very clear idea and understanding of kind of what would be asked of them in those cases when they did not have the time to make it to the actual class. So that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, Erin, yes.
While we're on the same topic of missing meetings, you've said now twice that you sent out an email months ago about having our class time on Wednesdays. I never received that email.
Oh, sorry. No, what I did is I sent a link to
a
fill out
Google
a survey.
form. Yeah, to a Google form. It was sent on September 9th because I had a classmate send it to me, and
Oh.
I never received that. So I
Okay.
never got to vote on what day we had the meetings or class times. I never got the intro about you. Never got any of that. And I know that there are other,
what I used was I
know
used
that there
Canvas
are,
and all the students who were registered in the class that appeared
Yeah.
in Canvas. So I apologize.
right, but you should have also had a class list of everybody who is also in the program already. And that should have been the list that you used, because even if we weren't registered already, we didn't have to be registered by the time that you sent out that email.
Got it.
And I didn't receive that. So that's not fair. And so now our lives are being overturned. And I don't know if I'm speaking on behalf of everybody now, or if I'm just doing this for myself. I really don't. And at this point, I don't care who I'm speaking on behalf of. But I mean, you've said twice that you have sent it out, you know, a few months back. The email that I received from another classmate was September 9th. That's 2 weeks ago. That's
Right.
not a few months back. And so, I mean, how do I get to vote and say when we have our class time? And how is it that you didn't know that our cohort was meeting on Tuesdays? How did Michael not communicate that to you? And how is it that another group of students is taking precedence over a cohort that's been in existence for a full year? And I'm sorry if I feel like I'm attacking you, but I really feel like we're getting walked on for this. So, I mean, can you help us out with this?
Yeah, no, I can definitely empathize with your concerns. Okay, so first of all, you asked, how was this information not communicated to me? Listen, Michael shared his syllabi with me, and the class meeting time was on the syllabi, but it was never communicated to me that that class meeting time was an agreed upon time that was to be maintained throughout the duration of the program.
Yeah.
And it's not all him. I'm not trying to put the blame on him. I didn't think about the fact that, you know, that it would be beneficial or it would be desirable for everyone to be meeting on the same day every term of the program.
I mean, our lives have revolved around this for a year.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, no, you guys are starting your second year. No, I fully understand. And
I mean, why would our lives not be revolving around this for a whole year? I mean, I was prepared and ready to go with a babysitter and everything yesterday for class to start.
right. Well, actually, the first day of the term was today, so there were no classes yesterday.
Right, but I mean, I was ready to go, on board, ready to go for classes to start yesterday. My husband took time off unpaid today to be with our daughter, so that I could be in class tonight.
Okay.
So I mean, this isn't fair. And if other classmates didn't get the same email, come on.
Yeah, again,
Come on.
it was not communicated to me that I've already said this. It was not communicated to me that this meeting time was to be respected and retained for the duration of the program. And it was not communicated to me, and I didn't ask. Again, I'm not trying to push any blame on anyone else. I'm also partly to blame. I'm the person who made the schedule. I did not realize that there were students who were not on Canvas who were also enrolled in the program. And that's on me.
Our program has been established for a year, and just because we haven't registered yet, I mean, I will give you the honest to God truth. I forgot to register until last week.
Okay.
I forgot to register until last week. I sent my parents who live over in Sumter, which is about an hour outside of LaGrange, to go pay my bill because I forgot. And I registered as soon as they paid my bill.
Okay.
And so I forgot to register. You know, one of those things slipped my mind. It's the start of the school year. Sorry.
I've been there as well.
That doesn't mean that I'm not in the program. Why would I just all of a sudden drop out?
No, again, I assume that the list on Canvas, the students on Canvas were my students. I should have consulted with Janet to get the master list. And this was something that was not provided me and I did not think to ask. So I apologize. And I feel terrible that I did not include you in the email.
Yeah, and now we have 2 days worth of classes instead of 1.
I have a request about that actually.
Yes.
I was just wondering if it was possible to perhaps condense it so that we do, because I'm noticing perhaps that some of the days don't overlap. So maybe we'll meet on a Wednesday and then but we won't meet on a Thursday. I'm wondering if we could perhaps condense it so it's all on a Wednesday, but we say, okay, today's going to be about the collaboration, and then the next week will be about, it would make it a lot easier for me personally if it wasn't on a Thursday, because that was the one day I did put in that request that you said. I said that was a day that was going to be extraordinarily difficult to even do anything with. I was just thinking maybe we could do some kind of thing to make it so it might be still 1 day a week rather than 2. I understand that you have a plan for this week for sure with today and tomorrow, but I'm wondering if in the future, as some way to maybe appease the cohort, to maybe make it just Wednesday, and we could do 1 day is collaboration, the next week is I can't even think of the title. I'm so
issues in special education.
Thank you. It's just an idea I have out there. I'm thinking that might make people feel a little bit better if it was just 1 day. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I can look into it. Absolutely. Because it's certainly my goal to be flexible. I mean, you all are being flexible now. I've introduced this huge change kind of into your routine. And so yes, I can look at the syllabus and see what I can do about doing kind of the every other week format. So I'll have to look into that. It's not something that I can commit to right this moment, because I would have to look at it and kind of retool things, move things. But
yes, I understand that. Yeah. I do understand you have to look at it.
That actually, I was going to suggest exactly what Amy was saying, because I noticed that as well. And just because I feel so bad that I cannot come to a single Thursday meeting, that's really stressful for me. But I have a little bit more flexibility with changing our district meetings on Wednesdays. And I noticed that overlap. So that was something that I was also, Amy, you're on the same page as me, was thinking that might be beneficial, like, for more than one of us. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So yeah, I will do my best to do that. And so I will get back to you. Sorry, I'm just writing down a note for myself.
So is it right though that there are 4 weeks where we do have 2 classes?
Are there 4 weeks?
Yeah, the week of November 4th, the week of November 13th, the week of December 2nd, the week of December 9th, we would have both classes. If you look at both syllabi.
So we do not have a class meeting this day on the 9th. Or sorry, we don't have a class meeting for this class on December 9th.
That's not what the syllabus said, because I just went through and I wrote it all out on my calendar.
So the syllabus, I have it here on my screen, on the screen. Sorry, on the screen that you're seeing on your computer.
I was naming Mondays. I was naming Mondays. The week of Monday. I was naming.
Okay. Sorry, I apologize. Okay, well, hold on a minute. Let me.
So Wednesday, November 6th, Thursday, November 7th, Wednesday, the 13th of November, and 14th of November, we would have class.
Yes, there are some weeks during which both classes would be held. But I'm going to do my best to reduce that to just one class meeting per week. Because as
That
I
would
said,
be amazing. If you could do that, that would be absolutely amazing.
yeah, I mean, it might not be possible. I mean, again, because there are a certain number of hours that, you know, based on the amount of credits each course is worth, that we have to meet, that we have to have online meetings and sessions. So I also need to take that into consideration. But I will certainly look into it, and I will certainly do my best to make that change.
Wait, what did you just say?
No, what I said.
What was that statement you just said about there are a certain number of online hours that we have to have?
Right. So based on the number of credits for the course, there is a requirement of face-to-face meetings associated with that.
How many face-to-face meetings did we have last term, you guys?
Okay. So that's not, yeah, I don't know anything about last term since this is my first term. Right. So I've heard that. So I've heard that. So just let me get.
During summer term.
What's that?
We had none during summer term.
We had 0 during summer term. 0, big fat 0 during summer term.
Okay. Well, again, unfortunately, I can't speak to that because.
No, that was just the first that I think all of us have heard of that statement.
Okay.
Interesting. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. So again, I'm just communicating what I've learned in my short time here, and I'm going to confirm it and do what I can to satisfy that requirement while at the same time reducing the number of online meetings that we have. Okay. Well, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to talk about all this. And again, it was not my intention to come in here and just shake things up. I did not realize that, me kind of changing the days of classes was going to be such a big kind of wrench in the system, so to speak. So
I think had we all had a say in it, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. But because we didn't all have a say in it, it's a big deal.
Right.
And I mean, because you said one thing to me and it was something totally different, it's a big deal.
Okay. Wait, I said one thing to you and it was totally different?
Yeah, you sent an email on the 9th and you told me it was months later. It's a big deal. Sorry, it's a big deal.
No, I understand. I'm not downplaying that fact. I agree with you. And it's, there's no one to blame but myself. I should have sought out a masterclass list. I should not have assumed that the people on Canvas represented my entire cohort. And so I apologize.
Yeah, you've got, 3 other people who aren't part of this conversation either, too?
Yes, 3 other students are currently not here.
So.
Is this going to be what this is going to be for the rest of the time?
I hope not.
Can
no.
we, move on?
No, I mean, there were, yeah. Well, there were some concerns to air, and yeah, but we're done.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to be covering collaboration and consultation. I'm going to take over the screen and have some slides prepared. So we're going to be talking about a number of kind of factors, a number of elements of effective collaboration and consultation in the context of special education, so working with general education teachers and other service providers. So today we'll just do kind of a whirlwind tour of some of the stuff that we're going to be covering in more depth as the term progresses. So why collaborate? Well,
Oh my God.
If at any time if you have questions, feel free to just chime in and ask. So kind of the seeds of collaboration were laid in PL 94-142, and as we'll recall from SPED 522, that's the Education of All Handicapped Children Act. The first mandate requiring that American schools provide FAPES, free and appropriate public educations, to students with disabilities. And while PL 94-142 never kind of explicitly addressed collaboration or defined what collaboration means or how it should be kind of pursued or provided a model for it that would be effective toward meeting the learning needs of students with disabilities. They did require that special educators and related service providers work together in the implementation of IEPs, as you are all aware of from SPED 522. And certainly this language, working together in the context of an IEP, implies some component or some degree of collaboration. We skip forward 29 years to 2004 with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. And we're all familiar with this idea of the FAPE in the least restrictive learning environment. A setting as close to the general education classroom as possible, in which students can have their learning needs, behavioral needs, psychological needs met, while at the same time making satisfactory educational progress. And for many, this means inclusion in the general education classroom setting, but not for all. For some students, particularly those with more severe disabilities, a general education classroom may not be the most appropriate or the least restrictive learning environment. But notwithstanding, now more than ever, certainly general educators and special educators are providing instruction to students with a broad range of learning, behavioral, and developmental differences. And so this requires collaboration, right? Because when we think about serving students with learning differences, we have to start shifting away from the kind of the more traditional general educational instructional delivery format. And we just start thinking about other kind of call them ingredients to be introduced in the classroom. Culturally responsive teaching, the principles of UDL, or universal design for learning, differentiated instruction, positive behavioral supports. And so toward this end, toward the end of providing a FAPE and an LRE, collaboration is definitely required, especially in those situations where we have students who are, being served in inclusionary programs. So while IDEIA does not formally define collaboration, they do ask that state governments and their departments of education endeavor to promote improved collaboration between SPED and general education teachers. So the language is there. However, they just don't define what that term means. And certainly collaboration is necessary in the kind of context of identification, so assessment, evaluation of children who may have disabilities, and also in the preparation of pre-service teachers. So we do have kind of this language for collaboration built into the federal special education law. We see it pop up in other places as well. The Council for Exceptional Children has a number of special education content standards. Number 10 requires that special educators routinely and effectively collaborate with families, other educators, related service providers, and personnel from community agencies in ways that are culturally responsive. The Interstate New Teacher Assessment Standards Consortium also reflects the need for teachers to best possess the skills that are necessary for collaboration with other service providers, other teachers, etc. And also parents and families of students with disabilities. So we have all this language. We have kind of, you know, it's very kind of logical for us who come from backgrounds of special education that to meet the diverse needs of students who have learning differences, that collaboration between a number of different specialists in the field of education is definitely necessary. But it has been recognized that many professionals from related disciplines might not kind of grasp the collaborative nature of the work that we do. And there's a reason for this. So way back in 1975, if we go back in time, well, it, you know, legislated collaboration. We have the language about kind of working together in the context of developing and meeting the learning objectives outlined in IEPs. This law was also a major factor in contributing to kind of a separate culture and a separate role within it, the broader education field for special education. Right, it became common for students to, who were entitled to special education to receive individualized services, oftentimes in separate settings from their typically developing peers. And so kind of this tension between students having individualized learning requirements and this need for collaboration resulted in kind of a unique culture for special education being reinforced. And this kind of emphasized a separate and fragmented service provision model in conjunction with parallel rather than collaborative interaction between special and general education teachers. You know, at this point in history, we didn't have kind of our eyes on kind of the importance of kind of working together as a team. You know, what the speech and language pathologist did fell within the purview of that person's expertise. What an occupational therapist did fell within the purpose of that individual's purview or their expertise. And when they came back into the classroom, well, that was the kind of teacher's territory, as it were. In the 80s, the former United States Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services Director, Dr. Madeline Will, questioned this practice of providing special education services in separate settings. And she called for special educators and regular education staff to collaborate and to kind of shift away from this fragmented and this separate provision of services into a more inclusive model in which students are served to the greatest extent possible within the general education classroom alongside their typically developing peers, with a lot of emphasis placed on the special education teacher kind of supporting a general education teacher toward that end. So there are a number of definitions of collaboration. It comes from the term collaborate or collabor, which means working together. And I'm wondering if one of you would be willing to share what collaboration means to you. Based on the kind of collaboration that you do in your jobs, what exactly does it mean?
I'll share.
Okay.
Collaboration is huge at my school.
Okay.
We're a small school. There's only like 80 kids total in the whole school.
Okay.
an alternative high school. We had how many kids are on my caseload? I have anywhere between like 25 to like 30 plus kids on my caseload, right, in a school of 80. So it's a lot. A large percentage of our population is SPED. And we collaborate at least twice a week, like in an official sense. But we have like 50,000 like Google Docs where we like take notes on kids, and we have like informal collaboration with teachers and the principal and everyone together all the time, because it really, our kids have a lot of needs, and we need to communicate that to everybody all the time because everyone works with every single student. So
Right.
it's big.
So it sounds like this collaborative model is an important part of the school's organizational structure.
Yeah, it's embedded.
Formal times for this purpose.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have an experience or definition that is different based on?
I don't know that mine is different. I'm also in a small school like Jessica because we're a rural school. So we have, I think we're up to 95 right now. And we're a blend. So there's only 5 of us total. So there's a K1, a 2, 3, a 4, 5, a 6, 7, 8, and then there's me.
Mm-hmm.
And so our collaboration looks very different than like a large school. There's set meetings, where we have to collaborate, but then like I have my SST team that I have to meet with, which includes our speech person and our behavior specialist and our school psych and our principal, and then the teachers as well. But then there's also the collaboration because our school is so small and most of the kids go there all 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
We know our community really, our community out in London is very, it's its own community. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. If you don't know this community and they don't accept you, it's very difficult to do any work with the families. And so a lot of us, like today, we didn't have a set meeting date, but we needed to collaborate on some random little pieces here and there with my schedule changing, and a kid's on a SPED bus now, and so now I have to change groups again because he's not there for his minutes. I'm sorry, Lacey. Out. That's my little one. So collaboration for me looks very different, like depending on who I'm with or what I'm doing that day. But ours is really fluid. Like we have set times, but our collaboration is also like on the fly a lot of the time in my school. So, but we collaborate constantly throughout the day. So I know like at the bigger schools, they'll have a meeting for this and a meeting for that and a meeting for this and a meeting for that, where it doesn't really work that way at London. So collaboration, but I have to say, out of all the schools I've ever worked at, I collaborate more in the smaller school than I've ever collaborated in a bigger school ever. So
it's the same for me too. Sounds similar.
Yeah.
So in these, for example, Kimberly, you mentioned sitting down with like speech language pathologists, for example, SLPs. Yeah. And do they, in these meetings, are you just kind of like focusing on a single student for, a set number of minutes, and like here are kind of the things that I'm seeing come up, and the speech pathologist is kind of giving you strategies or techniques, or what does that look like?
So it depends. So if it's like an SST meeting versus RPI, like the teachers will put a form in that, of a student they have a concern about. And like if it's behavioral and they're going to be on the upcoming meeting, I'll call Brian Middleton, who's our behavior for our district. And I'll be like, Brian, can you come to this meeting? We're going to need you this day. And I will constantly always put those key people on there, even if they aren't going to be part of it. But yes, there's a set time. So it'll be like, an SST, we usually limit it to about 4 to 5 students max. Mm-hmm. We try to keep it around 4, and then like I facilitate one person times, and one person, like whoever the classroom teacher is for that student, will go through, and they'll have already filled out the form. So we kind of go through the form, and then they add some background pieces and things like that. And then we'll have a bunch of strategies that I type down, and then we kind of disseminate who's going to do what and tackle that.
Okay.
And then we'll stop and we'll go on to the next student. If it's something more fluid, like what happened today, where somehow, I think it was with the school closing, I don't know, one of the students who's supposed to be on a SPED bus never ended up on it, and they had to shut the bus down, pull over to the side. And so, like, I was dealing with trying to get a bus lined up for this kid. So, like, that collaboration was different. You know, it's kind of, that's what I'm talking about when, like, these things happen on the fly. It's super easy to take care of them. RTI, same thing. We go through every single student, 20%. I have a chart. They're listed. We just go bam, 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 bam. Whatever it is, if they aren't getting any, what am I going to do? So each meeting, the collaboration looks a little different. Does that make sense? So it depends what I'm doing with that particular collaboration piece.
No, I mean, you know, we can think about kind of within-person factors that contribute to effective collaborative relationships. So, you know, personal characteristics of people, et cetera. We'll talk a bit more about those in a few minutes. And then we can also talk about the outside of the person factors. So like the organizational part. So, you know, a school actually allocating time for collaboration is definitely a predictor of more effective collaboration between educational service providers and teachers.
When we also, our district on Wednesdays, we have, I don't know if this has always been there and we just kind of did it, but it's like once a month, there's on our district is on Wednesdays, and it's directed by the district. It's called team collaboration. And I know it looks different in the bigger schools. In our school, it's because there's only 5 teachers, including me. So that's really only 4 gen ed. We meet and we discuss all sorts of stuff. So our team, the team collaboration that's district mandated, is like our whole school, our whole building meets at that one. So that one's also kind of just a touch base type of a thing. So we have that type of collaboration too.
Let me put this question out there. Has anyone ever been in a situation or, you know, had a student that was challenging in some way and you believe that you would have benefited from collaborating with a kind of a more expert, somebody who is more expert in the area, but you did not get the opportunity to do so? Or would you say that you generally do feel supported in that regard?
I'm pretty supported, but sometimes I have teachers coming to me asking about behavioral things, and I'm like, okay, well, I think we need to all talk together with Brian. I'm in the same district as Kim, and if we can all figure out a plan, do we need to make an FBA? What do we need to do to help this kiddo be successful? But most of the time, we are able to collaborate and solve the problems. And if that doesn't happen, it actually nothing works, because usually the behavior problems are so huge or such a problem that the student's not learning, and it needs to be solved. So I've always been able to talk to someone. I've never not talked to someone and gotten what I need. If I need help, I'm real willing to help and get the help I need.
So can I jump in?
Oh, absolutely. Were you done, Amy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm in LeGrand, obviously, and we're like the big district around here, but we're still like rural because we're the big city, but there's like not really a city. It's because there's no other city.
Right.
So we don't have like a behavior specialist at all. So we have like our special ed director, and then we have like the school psychologist and stuff like that, but we don't have somebody who's like a designated behavior person. So we kind of like, our school district is just starting to kind of like try to train people to change like our FBAs and our behavior plans, because what tends to happen is that we like follow a process to write them, but then nobody like has the expertise to like really know how to follow through completely.
Implement them, yeah, with fidelity, yeah.
Yeah, so that's difficult. And then part of it is like I might know just from experience how to deal with certain kids, because like, you know, I get to spend more time with them, so I know them. But then you know, when they're in a classroom with like 25 plus other kids and the teacher just has this behavior plan, but nobody like really has time to train the teacher and how to do it. And then there's just so many pieces where like they could end up with like the school counselor, they could end up with me, they could end up with the principal. And we have like a student success room where the counselor's in there sometimes, and other times it's just like a para where kids can take a break. So it's like, it's just hard. We're kind of just starting to get to a point where we're trying to like have plans where we have everyone on the same page, but it's hard because we don't really have anybody who's an expert.
Right, to kind of get everyone directed appropriately.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I don't know. The biggest issue it seems like is when kids, because we have like behavior. The other thing is we have a local behavior organization that's the one that's like partially funded by the state. And they like help with some of our programs, but it's just a weird situation where like the school and them kind of get into arguments because they like don't want to let go of power sometimes, but they're like not working with the school on anything that, I don't know, there's like a weird dynamic sometimes, or they like don't want to give the school records, even though we have the HIPAA form to do the records, which is a problem with like every organization that I try to get information from with a HIPAA form. But so that's another thing, is we have kids that like are in like a day treatment program, and then they're transitioning back into like the school kind of behavior room, and then back into gen ed. But the transitions a lot of times will be like very rushed, or like the kid kind of like, there's not really a plan. There's not like a transition meeting with a behavior plan where the people are trained.
Like result in like a regression
every single time. And so it gets really frustrating, because like I have a kid right now who I might talk to you about later who's on the spectrum. And he went from like the self-contained classroom program onto like my caseload, but there wasn't really any communication to transition that. So like he had a one-on-one para for most of the year last year, but they kind of told us like, oh, she doesn't really help him that much anymore, all this stuff for the second half of the year. Well, they didn't really talk to the para, I don't think, because then he like started immediately having meltdowns. And when we talked to the para, it turns out that she actually was helping him a lot. And it just would have helped a lot, like to have her kind of train the teacher and talk to people, so that, because she's the one that she had like 3 years of experience working one-on-one with this kid. So like she's the expert in that kid. But that just like wasn't done. There's just a lot of that where it's like something doesn't follow through, and then a kid just ends up having like meltdowns because they don't have the tools. They're not set up for success.
There's no consistency in the implementation.
Right. So there's like good intentions, but there's just that last piece in the collaboration where there's like always something missing, and then it all like falls apart.
No, it's not a good situation. You know, I can kind of relate to that. When I was, this experience is not coming from the classroom. It's coming from the work that I did in homes and with families. Like a lot of the stuff that we would work on, you know, the behaviors and stuff that we would work on in the context of the in-home therapy, you know, it was very important that parents, you know, they kind of are on board with what we're doing. And, you know, it was very often the case, and the reasons for this happening varied, that it's like, yeah, you know, you kind of make progress, you see progress in sessions, but then, you know, I'm there for 2 hours. And then when I leave, like none of what we talked about is implemented. So you like come back the next day and, you know, you just kind of don't see that progress. And it's hard on the kid, you know, to be kind of pulled and pushed in these different directions. Oftentimes it was kind of a cultural thing. You know, there could be issues with kind of language barriers. And sometimes, you know, it was just not really feasible. I mean, families, you know, had, you know, I was working with families who had like multiple children, and it's like to wait out a tantrum when you've got 3 other kids to worry about and to work with was just not realistic. And so I can definitely relate to those challenges and kind of the lack of consistency. But we'll move on here.
Yep.
So it's interesting. The collaboration is, people have looked at kind of this concept in special education, a number of different researchers and practitioners, and there are just a lot of definitions for what collaboration means. Working together, since collaboration means working together, we think about working together to foster a positive interdependence that exists among team members who agree to pool and partition their resources and rewards and to operate from a foundation of shared values. Pool and partition their resources. It's an important part of this definition. Certainly we all have kind of our areas of expertise, our areas of specialization, and it's unrealistic to kind of think of oneself as somebody who has kind of the cure-all or the breadth of knowledge required to address all of a student's educational, social, psychological needs. And we also need, by partitioning resources, we need to kind of know, we need to know when it's appropriate to kind of defer to somebody who, might have more experience or expertise than we do in a particular area, which can be hard. I think oftentimes we like to think of ourselves as, being informed and being competent, but, and kind of in most realms of instructional provision, but that's not always the case. And so certainly learning to recognize that is important. Intensive joint working practice. Okay, there's a different one. A mutual effort to plan, implement, and evaluate the educational program for a given student. So my point here is that even though there is kind of this shared, kind of understanding of the importance of collaboration, people, when they think about this term, they think about it differently, which can present challenges to realizing effective collaborative practices in the schools. I'm going to skip through some of these, but I'm not going to skip through this one. Collaboration is characterized by parity. Who's heard this? Who knows what this term parity means? Anyone? Well, it means essentially equity. It means equality, right? We are all kind of, capable and skilled toward the end of supporting students, kind of within certain ranges of capacity, and we need to be respectful and, open to the fact that other people, other professionals, other service providers, other teachers are going to have different skill sets that are of equal kind of importance toward the end of helping students achieve their educational outcomes. I'm going to skip through that one. And so we can talk about collaboration in terms of the values, the roles, and the skills that are required to make it realized. Others emphasize the contextual settings, and so we talked about some of these. So the structural components of a school, so building time into your schedule for these collaborative endeavors, not putting it on you to make the time to get the information that you need from, other service providers or other teachers on your own time. So we can also talk about models of collaboration. And there are different ones. We'll talk about 3 general types. I'm just checking the time. Got about 23 minutes. And so these models for collaboration, they essentially define the manner in which individuals on a team collaboratively relate to one another. And so these models, they are informed by different sets of assumptions. And these assumptions are kind of what guide a teacher or a team of educational professionals' actions. We see differences between these models of collaboration in terms of the organizational structure and purposeful function of the team. So the structure refers to a team's organization, membership, and their corresponding roles, whereas the function is the intent of the team, the actions and the purpose of the interactions between the members of that team. So now we'll look at we'll talk about 3 kind of broad models that are kind of out there and kind of recognized as being commonly implemented within schools. The multidisciplinary approach. And so this is, the best way to think about this is kind of a very traditional kind of like pull-out model. And so this is characterized by the application of services by a variety of different disciplines acting independently. So this approach might not involve much kind of teamwork between the service providers and the professionals who are serving a student. Kind of the perspective here is that, myself as a teacher, I focus on the stuff that happens in the classroom. You are the occupational therapist, so you teach the kid strategies for sensory integration, and you are the speech language pathologist, so you're going to kind of be working on the social pragmatics using your own kind of approach, and then the student's going to come back to me, and I'm going to do my thing, and the student is kind of expected to, kind of incorporate these kind of various learnings. And the presumption here is that these services should only be provided by those who are the experts in their provision, and those who are capable and have the knowledge of assessing and serving that child toward those ends.
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I know you're recording this and I can see this, and I know this is how the screen will show up to go back to, but are these like slides or a PDF or something that you can also send to us that we can review?
Oh, yeah. No, these will be on Canvas. Absolutely.
Okay, you're going to post whatever this type of document is.
Yeah, it's just a set of PowerPoint slides. So, yeah, everything will go onto Canvas for sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And so, as I mentioned, a multidisciplinary approach is very kind of segmented. It's going to result in much of the assessment and intervention occurring in isolation from other service disciplines and providers. So like co-teaching, for example, would not be an example of a multidisciplinary approach. Push-in services with a speech-language pathologist or an occupational therapist or a reading specialist would not be an example of a multidisciplinary approach. And while this, it's certainly an approach that could be effective for some students, it's not the ideal, because this multidisciplinary approach is kind of maintaining this kind of this fragmented approach to providing an education. Another common approach is referred to as the interdisciplinary approach. And so again, this approach is similar to a multidisciplinary approach, but there's more effort made to kind of communicate, to open up channels of communication between the teachers and other service providers who are serving the educational needs of a child or student. And so there's more kind of coordination and cooperation amongst the disciplines during assessment and activity planning. We kind of let down the barriers. What we want to do is kind of blend the roles, right? We don't want we don't want kind of this approach that, you know, kind of puts people on pedestals and they're the specialists and what they say goes. What we're trying to do now is to get into a more kind of integrated approach where, you know, an SLP gives you strategies to use in the classroom when, you know, when a student on her caseload, you know, is not seeing her. So it's moving more towards generalization and kind of bringing people, other teachers, et cetera, on board and informing them to better serve students. And so these kind of activities might be, you know, formal, informal conferences, meetings with one another, you know, during a periods of assessment or program development, or when planning, you know, a particular intervention. And so it's the transdisciplinary approach that is kind of what is considered the ideal or the gold standard when you look at people who have tried to, you know, identify the most productive and most beneficial approaches to collaboration. So the number of characteristics that are associated with this approach. And so I mentioned that starting from the multidisciplinary approach and moving on to the transdisciplinary approach, we're moving toward a more integrative team structure and a more integrated program or intervention delivery structure. A major emphasis on cross-discipline communication, you know, knowledge exchanges between educators and other service providers. All toward the end of, you know, focus on the student, and also an emphasis on parental participation. So here we're moving more toward a, you know, a kind of true collaboration. Kim, kind of like what you mentioned happening at your school, like sitting down with, you know, the different kind of people who work with the students and talking about behaviors or learning about, you know, different strategies for, you know, working with a student who has, you know, challenges with language, for example. And so it also does include kind of consultative components because, you know, you might be giving some strategies to a general education teacher for how to work with one of your students or a student on your caseload. A speech language pathologist might be kind of consulting with you, giving you guys, both you and a general education teacher, strategies for helping a child, you know, who has, for example, challenges with pragmatic language. Or maybe it's an occupational therapist who's kind of teaching you how to kind of recognize when a child might be requiring, you know, kind of a sensory break and kind of what you can do to, you know, kind of be more in tune with that child's needs and how to support that child during that time. Whereas in the multidisciplinary approach, we might think of, you know, kind of the specialists within, you know, specific areas, maybe an SLP, an occupational therapist, a school psychologist, being kind of solely responsible for kind of helping a student kind of, you know, reach the goals that that they are kind of have been tasked with helping that student reach. Here, what we're trying to do is move away from that, and we're trying to give everyone on the team the tools that are required in order to meet a student's needs. And this has a term, and it's called role release. A process where professionals engage in different activities across discipline boundaries. So basically teaching, you know, your colleagues, sharing your expertise with them so that they become better prepared and more informed to be, you know, meeting the students' needs in the classroom. And again, we see this term parity, equality, a recognition of equality, mutual trust, respect, and open communication between all parties. Poking his head up again. And lastly, we have co-teaching. And there's this term called teaming, right? That kind of characterizes general and special education teachers working in inclusionary classroom settings. But it doesn't have to be just a general education teacher or a special education teacher. And it can apply to different specialists working alongside a general education teacher or a special education teacher in the classroom. Now, I'm wondering, does anyone here, do the schools that you work at utilize a co-teaching approach? We've talked about the collaborative kind of part. How about co-teaching, where you have multiple, like 2 teachers in the classroom at once? Amy?
My cohort, who is working at Harrison, he's working with the 4th and 5th graders. I'm the one who's pulling like the really low kids for like K through 4th, and he's actually pushing in and is co-teaching in the 4th and 5th grade classrooms. It's a lot harder, I think, to do this model with younger kiddos, but as they get older, so far it's working fairly well. This is the first year they're really embracing this at the 4th and 5th grade level, and it's been interesting to watch because he wants to make sure he's working collaboratively with them and not just acting as an EA. You know, he has to like be careful because it can easily turn into that if you aren't careful. And he's like, I've got to make sure that I'm putting my input in and that they're listening to what I'm having to say. It's been a really interesting thing to watch. And I've started doing a little bit more with that because I've got some 4th graders and they're writing. I'm trying to make sure that I'm including, I don't go in and co-teach, but I'm using a lot more of their materials and using their what they're doing so that they're getting the exact same thing, but I'm teaching at a different level.
Got it. So trying to maintain kind of consistency with like the approach.
Yes.
And using the same materials.
But the co-teaching part, he's doing that, and it's been very very interesting actually to see what because there are challenges with that model in trying not to become an EA. Really, you can't allow that. You have to make sure you put your input in there and that you are supporting, but they're taking what you have to say to heart for those kiddos who are in need.
Well, right, and you mentioned it possibly not being as appropriate for younger kids as older kids, especially when, when we start working with secondary students, older kids. Co-teaching, like the co-teacher or whoever's in the classroom should be kind of thinking about serving other students in the classroom too, so that the kids that have the learning differences, don't become like ostracized. Like, oh, this person's here just to work with Jimmy. Jimmy has, Jimmy's A. Jimmy has, these kind of requirements that, necessitate another person coming in. And that's kind of a big thing in co-teaching is that, while the person is there for the most part to support the students who are on their caseload, they should also kind of be mindful of not ostracizing their students.
Yes, and my cohort is making sure that he's doing that. I mean, he's in the entire 5th grade. We have a pod of 5th graders with, there's 3 teachers teaching that in that pod, and then there's also 3 teachers in the 4th grade pod. And he's working with them at different times, and he goes into each classroom, and it's been so far it's been a real learning experience for both of us. Actually, I think for everybody involved, it's been a real learning experience.
All right. It brings new meaning to the saying, it takes a village.
Oh, big time.
Cool, guys. Well, so we're running up on like 6:52. I'm going to stop here for now. We didn't make it through all the slides, but I'll put them on Canvas. And again, I just want to acknowledge before we sign off that, I understand that there was a whole system in place and that I've come in and upset this system. So I recognize that. I think, you all are justified in raising your concerns. Well, it certainly wasn't my intention to spend like a whole bunch of time on this issue. I think it was important that we did it as a group. You all know each other. And so, know that I'm going to do my best to make some changes to make it easier on you all, because, that's my goal. And it's not my intention to be kind of, upsetting the balance that you all have kind of achieved in your lives based on what had come before me. So I thank you all. I think it was a good discussion, and I'm looking forward to, delving deeper into this material and also discussing contemporary issues and trends in special education tomorrow. So,
can I ask one last question?
Oh, yes. Go ahead. Who do I have here? Oh, Kimberly, yes.
Yeah. I think you said this in a email or something. I ordered the book, but it said it was supposed to be here today, but it hasn't arrived. But I think you said you listed the
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the first 2 chapters onto Canvas.
Okay, good. Okay.
And, if you still are having issues locating the book, reach out to me personally.
Amazon has a lot of copies on there right now, and you can get them, the rental was $56, but I bought it for only $46. It's just it didn't arrive today like it was supposed to. So
and that's fine. That's why I didn't assign anything for this first day, because I knew that I was late in the game getting it and it would take time. So yeah, no worries. And if you continue experiencing difficulties, anyone, just let me know, and we can, I'm more than happy to send out an additional chapter or put it on Canvas to make that work.
Okay, so you'll post it on to Canvas in the 550 class?
Yeah, so I'll put it in the 550 class. So we'll only use the 550 Canvas class for both 550 and 552. If you went on to 552, you probably would have noticed that it's completely empty. Since we're doing the classes together, we'll just use this Canvas shell.
Okay, I haven't looked at that yet. No, I was looking for the other part. Okay, thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you all for a nice evening. I enjoyed getting to know you, and I think we covered some important stuff. And I will be in touch about changes to schedules and within the next week, before our next meeting. Ideally, by the end of this week, I'll have some information. Okay?
So we will be meeting.
I have one more question.
Timmy.
You mentioned, or it looks like in one of these that we have an article due next week. Is that correct?
Is that the responses to question set number 1?
I saw that, but it looked to me like there was also something due in here on October 3rd, like an article review already. Is that true?
Which class?
I saw it on what's it called? Canvas.
So let me take over real quick. Sorry. It's important that we get this stuff all clarified.
It's an article review that's posted on 556. She's looking.
Oh, it's 556. Okay. Yeah, our review here is due on the 30th for 550. But we can talk about the article review for 556 tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And that's so that's about tomorrow's class. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna get through this. Thank you all for sharing. I mean, your concerns. I think that's important, and so I appreciate it. And I will see you all tomorrow evening. And have a nice night.
And thank you for listening. And
You're
thank
welcome.
you for everything.
Yeah, no, it's my job. It's my, and so I'm gonna do my best.
I have one more quick question.
Oh yes, Marta.
So at 4:30, you have it from 4:30 to 7, but that's just to get logged on.
Oh yeah, so so I have my staff members. They schedule these things for me. They give me a half hour beforehand just in case. But you're not responsible for being on until 5 o'clock. And the reason I was on early today was just to make sure that everything was working. Now that it is, it'll be 5 o'clock.
Is it a new link every meeting? So next Wednesday, for our Wednesday meeting, will we get another email with a different meeting link?
You will. That's how it works. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank
All right, well,
you.
thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you.
nice
Have
night.
a good
I'll see you
evening.
tomorrow.